just one staple in the corner will also get the same thing. So to review real quick, so today, yesterday was calendar checks, but I'm going to skip those this week because we had a weird Monday. I'm glad you're all safe and we're all good and everything's fine. Themes worksheet, characters, you guys will be working on Thursday and Friday to finish those up. You need to have 30 saving matters done by the work days. So I would suggest, because you have an essay to write.
How many?
Well, you have 30 total. That's been in the rubric the whole time. You've had about 2 a day. 2 every time we read.
I have like 9.
So you're close. So you just need a couple more. And you'll have time in those work days. But I suggest spending some time at home if you're nowhere near the ending of that, if you're only about halfway. I highly suggest coming home, doing some quick internet research. Okay, use the full text that I've linked out on Remind 101. Use Spark Notes, however, to get to get your quotes down. So that by Thursday and Friday, instead of it being like, oh God, I got to learn how to do all this stuff right away, I haven't started anything. Instead, you can come to class and ask me specific questions. Hey, Morris, I don't get what this says in the essay. Can you help me? Or which order does things go in? And at that point, it's much easier. You're going to have a much easier time in a Thursday and Friday. And then you won't have any homework on the weekend. So I'm suggesting to you now, do it now so that you don't have to worry about it on the weekend. Make sure you have 30 saving matters. It's just 30 quotes. Go online and type in important quotes, Fahrenheit, and you'll find people who have had all sorts of lists and just copy those. It doesn't really matter. That's more of a toolkit, again, the background for you then to use on this essay that you're about to write. Any questions about the agenda? So again, no warm-ups. Portfolio workday 1 and 2 on Thursday and Friday in the computer lab. And then your portfolio, make sure you have this written down in your handbook and wherever else, tattoo it to your forehead, however you want to do it. But it's due on Monday, 10/6. So that's a new deadline. I said it was somewhere at the end of September, so this is when it is for us. This is how we're finishing stuff up. Yes?
All right, for the journal,
correct, the reading journal, the saving matter list.
Can I quote a quote?
Yeah, so you mean like dialogue can be part of the say that you develop. Yeah, so dialogue in the book is something that you can identify or cite. That is, you can quote quotes.
You know the part when he was reading the book to the people?
Exactly. That's a perfect thing to quote. So it's a little quoteception there, a quote within a quote. Heather? No, so because Monday was kind of weird, I'm just like, I'll wait on that. I'll wait and check it next Monday. So I just didn't want, yeah, you did it, everything, and that's great. And that's really for yourself. It's not even for the points, but I know we like points too. Tony?
We're going to have Socratic seminar.
Oh, good question, Tony. No Socratic seminar this week either because, again, of the Strange Monday, as well as Wednesday's map testing. I want you guys to have that extra day to finish the portfolio instead of talking in class. As much as I'd like to have a Socratic seminar, we're going to move that till next week. Good questions, by the way. If you spoke up and asked a question just now, put +3 on your agenda for this week. Let's go ahead and review real quick what happened in the story, and then I want to talk about the essay, and then I want to finish the story itself. So yesterday we left off at the beginning of Part 3. Part 3 is called Burning Bright. It's sort of like Hunger Games. The third story is like Mockingjay. It's sort of as things come together, and all the major characters face major conflict at the end. So this is sort of the end point of our character's hero journey. You haven't spent a whole lot of time on hero journey unless you had Miss Lovett, perhaps. Did anyone learn about hero journeys last year at all? A few of you, if you took a particular English teachers like that. But we'll talk more about that next unit. Anyways, you'll be able to, we'll identify Guy Montag's hero journey. But he's in a major conflict. Beatty has driven him up to his own house. There was a fire alarm. Beatty is clearly showing his intellectual superiority over Montag. He's quoting scripture, he's quoting books, and he's like, you guys don't get it. These books make no sense. I can quote them faster than you can, and Montag's all confused, and then the alarm goes off. The alarm goes off, and they drive to a house, and it turns out it's his own house. And now Montag has to make a decision. Do I burn my own house? Do I fight and get away? Do I conform? And so Beatty tells him, here's a flamethrower, go at it. And Montag initially seems to be completely complicit in the process. He begins to burn the house down. He's not even really caring about the books. He's just burning the beds where him and his wife didn't spend any time together and just lived around each other. He's burning the walls. He's burning the television screens and letting them destroy it. Beatty keeps reminding him of the books, Montag. Eventually he burns the books as well. Mildred has already gone out of the picture. We never see her again. She drives away in a taxi cab. She's called in the alarm on Montag. Beatty begins to then bait, as his name implies, begins to bait Montag and says, how did you think this would end? What did you think would happen quoting poetry like a damn fool? Do you really think that our society will change just because you think you're an intellectual or a snob now? Do you really think you knowing anything about the past or caring about people or caring about books will do anything to change the world? Beatty is saying, no, you can't change the world. No, history is worthless. And then begins to hit Montag, punches him in the face. But Montag has something in his hand. What does he have in his hand? He has the flamethrower.
And he burns.
And so as a result of having the flamethrower, Montag proceeds to point it at Beatty. And so here he's burning his stuff. He wants Mildred to help him, but Mildred gets in the car and leaves. They begin to destroy the house. He begins to burn the house down now, taking it up in flames. Beatty begins to say, you're under arrest, begins to punch him. And then Beatty is eventually incinerated himself. He gets burned with the books. He says, hand it over, guy, but at that moment he gets burned alive. So Montag shot one continuous pulse of liquid fire on him, and Beatty is burnt up. Montag later realizes that he, in fact, wanted to be burned. It becomes part of sort of an anti-martyr complex that Beatty produces. If he can get Montag to become a criminal, he can preserve the society that he's always wanted to produce. That is, for Beatty, a society where people are distracted. And so he becomes sort of this great martyr himself, much like the old lady. Dies, but knows that Montag's going to be a criminal and society will continue. So everyone will hate Montag for being a murderer. But that's not quite how it'll happen. He's going to run away, and for the next several scenes, the timeline rolls slower and slower as our character runs away and is trying to find things. We left off yesterday with, well, here's the hound trying to attack him, and he burns the hound up. And he begins to run away from people, trying to stay away from the helicopters that were flying overhead, and of cars that are trying to hit him over, teenagers trying to run him over for no reason other than to be entertained. He starts realizing this might be what happened to Clarice. He hates society even further. He finds some place in the gas station to clean up, and he's basically attempting to escape the city. He also hears on the radio in the gas station that there's a war coming. The war is here. It literally has started about an hour ago, and he hasn't fully, he's not fully aware of it himself. He plants a book in a fireman's house so that they fight, and then calls it in. So he begins the plot of destroying firemen. But it's all going to be a plot for naught, because as he leaves the society, you'll realize that the society is not long anyways. He spends some time with Faber, and Faber tells him that things will get better at some point in the near future. But at the meantime, we need to get out of the city. Here's some stuff, here's some money, and they part ways. Faber on a bus, Montag to run out of the city to hope that he can get away from the things tracking him. It becomes sort of a high-speed pursuit for society, and Faber and Montag recognize that he's being watched in film footage, almost like a movie. That they're liking this, doing slow-motion footage, talking about the mechanical hound, how awesome it is. And they're hoping to have a good ending, much like a good high-speed pursuit. You guys ever watch high-speed pursuits? Like on TV or whatever, you just kind of see them, and they're hoping something happens, but then if the guy does something too wrong, everyone goes, oh my gosh, I'm sorry we showed you that, right? But they're there with them the whole time, and then all of a sudden he shoots somebody or shoots himself, or it's this horrible thing. But they kind of like it. It's sort of like watching a car accident on the side of the freeway, and everyone slows down because they're like, oh, I see a dead body. Dude, oh God, I can't believe it. Oh, that's kind of cool. You know, and you kind of have this fascination. Well, society's distracted by that. There's big TVs, and they enjoy watching. And they need Montag to be caught. So they know all this, and Montag is going to try to keep the mechanical hound off his trail. He runs away, and he's trying to constantly get away from the helicopters and the lights. The mechanical hound will eventually catch somebody, but the question will be whether it'll be him or not. If we turn off the lights, so this is a little bit easier to see. The police are constantly talking about the fact that whether or not they're going to capture Montag. They know they're going to get him, and also that the war is starting at the same time. He eventually jumps into the river just as he feels the mechanical hound right on his trail, and he floats away. So this is kind of showing him jumping in the river. Him jumping in the river is symbolic of him changing. He's no longer Montag. It throws the scent off, and now he's floating away. I think this is where we left off. Did you have a question? Yes. So this is sort of the change from Montag. Montag then floats down the river for quite some time. He considers his life. He's putting gasoline on himself to change his scent. He's becoming a different person, a person of nature. So in some ways you can think of this as like Montag being born in nature for the first time. Smelling things. He talks about smelling things for the first time. He talks about memories of the past, places where one time he visited a farm and this is how it looked and felt, and he couldn't believe that stuff actually had, substance and density rather than just being microwaved little snack pieces. I often wonder whether kindergartners these days, how much longer they're going to know what an animal is, like a cow or a pig, or if everything that we have is going to be so processed that eventually you won't know, because you'll never be a part of that process. Anyone kill a chicken and eat it? See, 2 or 3 people have done that, but most of us haven't. I haven't done that. I've never killed an animal that I ate before. Actually, a fish. I did a fish hunt. So he's being reborn in nature, and so after a float down the river for far enough, he lands on tracks that Faber had mentioned could happen, that there's these bands of people that live outside the city. And these bands of people have Harvard degrees, the people who are no longer needed in society, but they keep books in their head. And these people are going to sort of be the archetypes or the architects for the new society once the city is destroyed. And so this is where we leave off the beginning of this, where he gets out of the river, finds the railroad tracks, and begins to walk until he meets up with another group. So that's a quick review of the last 30 pages or so. We're going to start on page 133. So go ahead and turn to page 133. Is there a book that's not been used for me? I don't know where my book is at. 133. And then I'll talk about the essay at the end of the period. Someone give me about 15 minutes. Just let me know. When do we get out of here? Normally? 55. So at 40, can someone please tell me so that I have some time, whether we're done or not? I'll try to make sure to stay on task and keep it selected readings towards the end so that we can finish and you can feel good about where we left off here. When we finish books, it always feels a little bit weird, like, oh, and that's it. Okay, thank you. And going off. So hopefully it'll leave you with some satisfaction, but probably not. 33 here. Actually, we're going to skip that. We're going to go even closer to the end here. Because this is basically him running away from Faber and jumping into the river. So we talked about all of that already. Okay, so page 145 in this book, I think 147 in the larger book, it says half an hour later. It was right in the middle. He's been floating down the river, and then he gets on a railroad track path. And the narrative slows down completely because it's trying to show you that he's being reborn in nature. So that's all it means. That's all that we're missing. If you want to read that on your own, feel free. Half an hour later, cold and moving carefully on the tracks, fully aware of his entire body, his face, his mouth, his eyes stuffed with blackness, his ears stuffed with sound, his legs prickled with burrs and nettles, he saw the fire ahead. There's a group of people. Remember, fire, a symbol used throughout the novel as a way to talk about the character's transformations, his development, how fire can be both warm and inviting, but also scary and violent and used for censorship. It's used for good or bad, just like books. Yes? For that book, I think it's like 147. I should say like half an hour later. Yeah. Sorry, my voice is still healing. The fire was gone and then back again. Of course, as he's going through the trees, he's seeing it winking in and out. He stopped, afraid he might blow the fire out with just a single breath. It seems fragile, but the fire was there and he approached it warily from a long way off. It took the better part of 15 minutes before he drew close indeed to it, and he stood looking at it from the cover. That small motion, the white and red color, a strange fire because it meant a different thing to him. It was not burning, you see. It was warming. Could be a quote that you use if you need a new one. 145. It was not burning, it was warming. Fires that burn are fires that are destructive and violent. This fire is one of warmth. It's inviting, like the candle in Clarice's face, like the knowledge that he's possessing with Faber, and now together with the people around the fire in the dark. He saw many hands held to its warmth, hands without arms, hidden in darkness. Above the hands, top of 146, motionless faces that were only moved and tossed and flickered with firelight. He hadn't known fire could look this way. He had never thought in his life that it could give as well as take. Even its smell was different. Have you ever been on a campfire and just kind of feeling the intimacy of the moment, like the immediacy of things, telling stories? Everything seems a little bit more meaningful. Your relaxing is a little bit more meaningful. Everyone's quieter. How long he stood he did not know, but there was a foolish and yet delicious sense of knowing himself as some animal come from the forest. He feels knowing that he's different. He's sort of wild, reborn in nature, like I've been saying. Liquid-eyed, sort of like the big empty eye of a deer, right? Doe-eyed, the big black pool. Having a fur and a muzzle and of a hoof. And he was a thing of horn and blood, and he could smell the autumn if you bled it out of the ground. And he stood a long, long time listening to the warm crackle of the flames. There was silence gathered all about that fire, and the silence was in the men's faces, and time was there, time enough to sit by this rusting track under the trees and look at the world, and also turn it over with their eyes as if they were held to the center of the bonfire, a piece of steel in these men that they were all shaping. So they're thinking with their silence. It was not only the fire that was different, it was the silence. Montag moved toward his special silence that was concerned with all the world. And then the voices began, and they were talking, and he could hear nothing of what the voices said, but the sound rose and fell quietly, and the voices were turning the world over and looking at it. And the voices knew that the land and the trees and the city which lay down the track by the river, and the voices talked of everything. There was nothing that they could not talk about, he knew, from the very cadence and motion and continual stir of curiosity and wonder in them. They're of Clarice, they're like Clarice. And then one of the men looked up and saw him for the first, or perhaps the seventh time, and a voice called to Montag. All right, you can come out now. Montag stepped back in the shadows. It's all right, the voice said. You're welcome here. Montag walked slowly toward the fire and the five old men sitting there dressed in dark blue denim pants and jackets and dark blue shirts. And he did not know what to say to them. Sit down, said the man who seemed to be the leader of the small group. Have some coffee. And he watched the dark steaming mixture pour into a collapsible tin cup which was handed him straight off. And he sipped it gingerly and felt them looking at him with curiosity. His lips were scalded, but that was good. The faces around him were bearded, but the beards were clean, neat, and their hands were clean. They had stood up as if to welcome a guest, and now they sat down again. Montag sipped. I'm actually doing it. Voice. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Montag. My name's Granger. He held out a small bottle of colorless fluid. Drink this too. It'll change the chemical index of your perspiration. Half an hour from now, you'll smell like two other people. With the hound after you, the best thing is bottoms up. Montag drank the bitter fluid. You'll stink like a bobcat, but that's all right, said Granger. You know my name, said Montag. Granger nodded to the portable battery TV set by the fire. We've watched the chase. Figured you'd wind up south along the river. When we heard you plunging around out in the forest like a drunken elk, we didn't hide as we usually do. We figured you were in the river. When the helicopter camera swung back in and over the city, something funny there. The chase seems to be still going on, but the other way. The other way, but why? Well, let's have a look. Granger snapped the portable viewer on. The picture was a nightmare. It was condensed and easily passed from hand to hand in the forest, all whirling color and flight. A voice cried, "The chase continues north in the city. Police helicopters are converging on Avenue 87 in Elm Grove Park." Granger nodded. "They're faking. You threw them off at the river and they can't admit it. They know they can hold their audience only so long. The show's got to have a snap ending, quick. If they started searching the whole damn river, it might take all night, so they're sniffing for a scapegoat to end things with a bang." When they say they're sniffing or they're looking for a scapegoat to end things with a bang, what does that mean? What are they looking for? They're looking to complete the entertainment with a nice ending, but they can't find Montag, so what are they going to do?
Probably find a hobo.
Find somebody else. It's a scapegoat. The word scapegoat comes from ancient religions that would take a literal goat, put their sins on the people, and kick them out into the desert to starve to death. Something that takes your sins away and then is punished for it. So the word scapegoat is a literary term, but they're finding a scapegoat, according to Granger, meaning they're going to find some random person, and as long as they can find somebody that justifies their actions, you have the entertainment, you have the completion of the story. This is what the media attempts to do so much, even today. Figure out a way to justify doing what we're already going to do in the first place, and then complete the story, and you feel safe as a result. So this is how it works. Now, they're going to figure it out. Look. Watch. They're going to find somebody. The camera hovering in the belly of the helicopter now swung down at an empty street. Up, see that? It'll be you right up at the end of the street is our victim. See how the camera's coming in? It's building the scene. It's creating the movie. Suspense. Long shot. Right now, some poor fellow is out for a walk. A rarity. He might be even an odd one. But don't think the police don't know the habits of queer ducks like that. Men who walk mornings for the hell of it. Or for reasons of insomnia. Anyway, the police have had him charted for months, years. Never when that sort of information might be handy. And today, it turns out, it's very useful indeed. It saves face. Hey, look there. And the men at the fire bent forward. And on their little screen, they saw a man turn a corner, and the mechanical hound rushed forward into the viewer. And the helicopter's lights shot down a dozen brilliant pillars that built a cage all around the man. A voice cried, "There's Montag. The search is done." And the innocent man stood bewildered, a cigarette burning in his hand. And he stared at the hound, not knowing what it was. He probably never even knew. And he glanced up at the sky and the wailing sirens. The camera rushed down. The hound leapt up into the air with a rhythm and sense of timing that was incredibly beautiful. Its needles shot out. It was suspended for just a moment, freeze frame, slow motion, for the audience to appreciate the beauty of this moment. The raw look of the victim's face, the empty street, the steel animal, a bullet nosing the target. "Montag, don't move," said the voice from the sky. And the camera fell upon the victim, even as did the hound. Both reached him simultaneously, and the victim was seized by the hound in the great spider-clenching grip. He screamed. Blackout. Silence. Darkness. Montag cried out in silence and turned away, disgusted. And then, after a time, the men sitting around the fire, their faces expressionless, they heard an announcer on the dark screen say, "The search is over. Montag is dead. A crime against society has been avenged." Now we take you to the sky room of the Hotel Lux for a half hour of Just Before Dawn, a program of Granger turned it off. They didn't show the man's face in focus. Did you notice? Even your best friends couldn't tell if it was you or not. They scrambled it just enough to make the imagination take over. Hell. Montag said nothing, but now, looking back, he sat with his eyes fixed to the blank screen, trembling. Granger touched Montag's arm. "Welcome back from the dead." Montag nodded. Granger went on. "Well, you might as well know who all of us are now. This is Fred Clement, former occupant of the Tom Hardy chair at Cambridge in the years before it became an atomic engineering school. Cambridge is known as a philosophy school, but now, in this latter time, it's just a place to make bombs. The other is Dr. Simmons from UCLA, a specialist in Ortega y Gasset. It's a Mexican, Latino American, and Latino poets. Professor West here did quite a bit for ethics. An ancient study now, because no one cares about ethics, about what's right or wrong, for Columbia University quite some years ago. And Reverend Pratt over here gave a few lectures 30 years ago and lost his flock between one Sunday and the next for his views. He's been bumming with us some time now. And myself, I wrote a book called The Fingers in the Glove, the proper relationship between the individual and society. And here I am. Here you are. Welcome, Montag." "I don't belong with you," said Montag at last slowly. I've been an idiot all the way." "Oh, we're used to that. We're all made the right kind of mistakes, or else we wouldn't be here. When we were separate individuals, all we had was rage. See, I struck a fireman when he came to burn my library years ago. I've been running ever since. You want to join us, Montag?" "Yes." "Now what have you to offer?" "Nothing. I thought I had a part of Book of Ecclesiastes and maybe a little of Revelation, but I haven't even that now." "Well, the Book of Ecclesiastes would be fine. Where was it?" "Well, here." Montag touched his head. "Ah." Granger smiled and nodded. "What's wrong? Isn't that all right?" said Montag. "Well, better than all right. It's perfect." Granger turned to the Reverend. "Do we have the Book of Ecclesiastes?" "One. A man named Harrison Youngstown." "Montag." Granger took Montag's shoulder firmly. "Walk carefully. Guard your health. If anything should happen to Harris, you are the Book of Ecclesiastes. See how important you've become in the last minute?" But I've forgotten." "No, nothing's ever lost. We have ways to shake down the clinkers for you." "But I already tried to remember." "Oh, don't try. It'll come when we need it. All of us have photographic memories, but spend a lifetime learning how to block off the things that are really in there. Simmons here has worked for 20 years, and now we've got the method down to where we can recall anything that's been read once. Would you like someday, Montag, to read Plato's Republic?" "Of course." "Well, I am Plato's Republic. Like to read Marcus Aurelius? Mr. Simmons is Marcus." "How do you do?" said Mr. Simmons. "Hello," said Montag. "I want you to meet Jonathan Swift, the author of that evil political book, Gulliver's Travels. And this other fellow is Charles Darwin. And this other fellow is Schopenhauer. And this one is Einstein. And this one here at my elbow is Dr. Albert Schweitzer. A very kind philosopher indeed. Here we all are, Montag. Aristophanes and Mahatma Gandhi and Gautama Buddha and Confucius and Thomas Love Peacock and Thomas Jefferson and Mr. Lincoln, if you please. We're also Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Do you have a question or Matthew? This is an important quote here. You can at least just write down that this one's Albert Einstein, this one's Mr. Jefferson, Mr. Lincoln, if you want to just summarize it. But he's basically saying, who are the books?
The reader.
The people who keep them in their minds, that apply the principles, and then one day they can write them down again, but that's really not the point. The point isn't the stuff. Faber already kind of developed that journey for Montag. It starts with Clarice. Clarice is this innocent, curious, not reading books, just talking about the world. From there he moves to Faber, who gives him some substance, that it's not just the books, but it's the stuff of the books. And now he sees it applied finally in this group with Granger and the others. They are applying the realities and the principles within the books, remembering them and using them. So you're all going to go off and do some things. Go to school and learn something great. And eventually you're going to be different than you are now. You're going to look back on yourself and realize, I didn't have that perspective before. And now I know so much more. I have my horizons in front of me. And the next time I struggle with something, it might recall something that happened. English 11 or English 12 or one of my college classes and be able to hopefully apply it or think about it or help somebody else with it. The same conflicts that existed centuries ago are the same conflicts we're having today. And he's going to summarize that in the following. He's like, he says, down top of 152. Everyone laughed quietly. So it can't be, said Montag, meaning you can't memorize all that. Oh, it is, replied Granger, smiling. We're book burners too. See, we read the books and then burn them, afraid they'd be found. Microfilming didn't pay off, so we always are traveling. We didn't want to bury the film and come back later. Too much chance of discovery. Better keep it in old heads where no one can see it or suspect it. We're all bits and pieces of history and literature and international law. See, Byron, Tom Paine, Machiavelli, or Christ, it's here. And the hour's late, and the war's begun. And we're out of here, and the city is there, and all wrapped up, its own coat of 1,000 colors. What do you think, Montag? I think I was blind, trying to go about things my own way, planting books in firemen's houses and sounding alarms. Now, you did what you had to do. Carried it out in a national scale, it might work beautifully, but our way is simpler and we think better. All we want to do is keep the knowledge, Montag. We're not out to incite anger or anyone, and it's perhaps for the good. We are model citizens in our own special way. We walk the old tracks, we lie in the hills at night, and the city people let us be. We stopped in our search to Cage, but they don't find anything. Our organization is flexible, very loose, fragmentary. Some of us have had plastic surgery even. Right now we have a horrible job. We're just waiting for the war to begin. And as quickly as it began, it ends. It's not pleasant, but then we're not in control. We're an odd minority crying in the wilderness. And when the war is over, perhaps we can be of some use in the world. Do you really think they'll listen then? Well, if not, we'll just have to wait. We'll pass the books on to our children by word of mouth and let our children wait. And on turn on to other people. A lot will be lost that way, I know. But you can't make people listen. They have to come round in their own time, wondering what happened and why the world blew up under them. It can't last. Same goes for today. You can't make people listen. One day, maybe one thing will click for you from a class, maybe this class, or maybe another class this year or next year. Maybe it'll take you 10 years and your kid's going to teach you something. You're going to go back to school and figure it out again. But at some point, somewhere, you have to make it come round in your own time. Thousands on the road. There are thousands of us. In the abandoned rail tracks tonight. Bums on the outside, but their libraries on the inside. It wasn't planned. At first, each man had a book and wanted to remember it, and did. And then over a period of 20 years or so, we met each other, traveling, and got this loose network going. The most important single thing we had to pound into ourselves is that we were not important, and we mustn't be pedants. We are not to feel superior. Sort of like how Montag acted in front of his wife, calling them all dumb and fools for not understanding or caring. Chapter 1 of Thoreau's Walden is in Green River. Chapter 2 is in Willow Farm, Maine. Why, there's one town in Maryland, only 27 people. No bomb will ever touch that town. That has the complete essays of a man named Bertrand Russell. Pick up that town almost and flip the pages, so many pages to a person, and when the war's over, maybe someday or even some year, the books can be written again. The people will be called in one by one to recite what they know, and we'll set it up in type until again another dark age, when we might have to do the whole damn thing over again. That might be an important quote, bottom of 153, in which we might have to do the whole damn thing over again. This might happen again. You can't say that any time the ending is happy for history. History is a continuing process. You ever think about how the United States in 100 years, where it'll be, or if it'll even be? Maybe there'll be something else that's replaced it. Maybe there'll be a dark age in which you guys are trying to pick up the pieces of old iPhone 6s that don't mean anything because there's no electricity. You have to build your society again.
Or enlightenment.
Huh?
Enlightenment.
Enlightenment, right? Have to understand that and build it again from the pieces of the past. I hope you don't have to experience a dark age. But it's happened. That's the wonderful thing about man. He never gets so discouraged or disgusted that he gives up on doing it all over again. Because he knows very well it's important and worth the doing. Top of 154. Well, what do we do tonight? We wait. and move downstream a little ways, just in case. And they threw out the fire, and they began to move. They stood by the river in the starlight. And Montag saw the dial of the waterproof watch. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. "Why do you trust me?" said Montag. "The look of you's enough. You haven't seen yourself in the mirror lately. Beyond that, the city has never cared so much about us to bother with an elaborate chase like they did with you. A few crackpots with verses in the heads can't touch them, and they know it. So long as the vast population doesn't wander about quoting the Magna Carta and their own constitution, it's all right. The firemen were enough to check that, but now then, no, the cities don't bother us. And you look like hell anyway." They moved along the bank of the river going south. Montag tried to see the men's faces but couldn't. Skipping down through, he thought that they might be glowing, but of course that was just the fire. There's nothing special about them. They're just dust jackets holding books on the inside. And he hears one person say, "Don't judge a book by its cover." And they all laugh quietly as he's admiring who these people are. Just then there was a shriek, 155, and the jets from the city gone overhead long before the men had looked up. Montag stared back at the city, and now that was only a faint glow. There was a shriek. I knew that his wife was back there. "It's strange, I don't miss her. I don't feel much of anything," said Montag. "Even if she dies, I realized a moment ago, I don't think I'll feel sad." He hears the story about his grandfather dying, talking about how we all make impressions in the world. So we're going to skip over to page 158. The war began and ended in that instant. Later, the men around Montag could not say if they had really seen anything, perhaps the merest flourish of light, the motion in the sky, perhaps the bombs were there, and the jets 10 miles off, 5 miles, 1 mile up, for the merest instant like grain thrown over the heavens by a great sowing hand, and the bombs with the dreadful swiftness yet again. This is historical footage of the development of little boy or little man, the bomb that destroyed Nagasaki. They start with perfect ingenuity and mechanics, and then before they're all done, they all signed it. It's an autograph of their ingenuity. Now, I'm not saying that, okay, this looks like it's horrible, but I mean, seriously though, think about an atomic bomb blowing up. I mean, it's a tragedy, even if it does end a war, so. The bombardment was to all intents and purposes finished once the jets had sighted their target, alerted the bombardier at 5,000 miles an hour, as quick as a whisper of a scythe. That's the Grim Reaper's weapon. The war was finished. Once the bomb's release was yanked, it was over. Now, for full 3 seconds, all the time in history, before the bomb struck, the enemy ships themselves were gone, already half a mile around the visible world, like bullets in which a savage islander might not believe even existed. And the blood is astonished to be freed in the air, and the brain squanders its few precious memories and puzzled dies. This was not to be believed. It was merely a gesture. Montag saw the flirt of a great metal fist over the far city, and he knew the scream of the jets that followed. Disintegrate. Leave no stone on another. Perish. Die. Montag held the bombs in the sky for a single moment, with his mind and his hands reaching helplessly up at them. He thought to himself, run to Clarice, run to Mildred, get out of there. But Clarice, he remembered, was dead, and Faber was out, maybe on a bus between two desolations now. And Mildred, get out, run. He saw her in his mind, thinking of her in a hotel. Maybe she was walking up in front of a mirror, maybe looking at the television screen right before it shuts out, and there's the mirror showing back to her her face that is sleepless and eating of itself. And as the first bomb struck, maybe, who knows, perhaps the great broadcasting stations with their beams of color and light and talk and chatter went first into oblivion. Maybe she heard her own screaming, because in the millionth part of the time left She saw her own face reflected there in the mirror instead of a crystal ball. And it was such a wild, empty face, touching nothing, starved and eating itself. I remember, Montag clung to the earth. I remember Chicago. Chicago, I remember now, Chicago, that's where we met. We met in Chicago a long time ago. Then the concussion blasted them down, and they fell to the ground. Then the sound of death fell after. Bottom of 160. Montag lying there, eyes gritted shut with dust, a fine wet cement of dust in his now shut mouth, gasping and crying, now thought again. I remember something else. What is it? Yes, it is. It's the part of Ecclesiastes. Now it's making sense. It's important to me. Part of it. Quick now, quick. Before it gets away, before the shock wears off, before the wind dies, the book of Ecclesiastes. Here. He said it to himself silently, laying flat. Looking at everyone, they all said, there. The men lay gasping like fish out in the grass, and they held the earth as children hold on to familiar things. Montag watched the great dust settle and the great silence move down upon the world, and eventually looked at the river. We'll go on the river. We'll look at the old railroad tracks, or we'll go that way, or we'll walk on the highways now, and we'll have time to put things into ourselves. And someday, after it sets in this long time, it'll come out of hands and our mouths, and a lot of it will be wrong. Walk in today and see the world and the way things walk around and talk, the way it really looks. I wanted to see everything now. And it'll gather together inside, and it'll be me. Look at the world out me. My God, look at it there. Outside me. Beyond my face. Now it's just beginning. So he has this whole idea of thinking of something that lays outside of him. And maybe one day these books will become his own identity. He did not move any farther after sitting up. They looked at each other. They saw that the city was flat. Someone struck a match, touched a dry paper, started a fire, and they decided to eat breakfast in the morning. So the morning lights up. And Granger at the fire here, so in the middle of 163. Sorry, I'm skipping paragraphs for those of you who are paying attention very closely. I appreciate that. Granger looks into the fire of their bacon breakfast and says, Phoenix. There was a silly damn bird called a phoenix back before Christ. Every few hundred years, he built a pyre and burnt himself. He must have been first cousin to man. But every time he burnt himself up, they sprang from the ashes. He got himself born all over again. And it looks like we're doing the same over and over. We got one damn thing that Phoenix never had. We know the damn silly thing we just did. We know all the damn silly things we've done for 1,000 years. As long as we know that, we'll always have it around where we can see it. And someday, we'll stop making the goddamn funeral pyres and jumping in the middle of them. We pick up a few more people that remember every generation. He took the pan off the fire and let the bacon cool. Now let's go upstream and hold on to one thought. You're not important. You're not anything. Someday the load will carry us and maybe we can help somebody. But even when we had books on hand a long time ago, we didn't use what we had. We went right on insulting the dead. We went right on spitting on the graves of poor ones who died before, people who died in wars, killed each other, bombed each other, and we just do it again. We're going to meet a lot of lonely people in the next few months and years, and when they ask us what we're doing, we can say we're remembering. And that's what will win in the long run. And someday somebody will be able to build the biggest goddamn steam shovel in history and dig the biggest goddamn grave of all time and shove war and cover that up. Come on now. We've got to go build a mirror factory. Start giving people mirrors to take a good long look at themselves in the next year. They finished eating and put out the fire. Montag walking, and after a moment found the others had fallen behind him. Going north, he becomes the leader at some level here. Yeah, we're going to do it right now. We're like literally the last page. But now there was long morning's walk until noon, and the men were silent, and it was because there was everything to think about and much to remember. Perhaps later in the morning when the sun was up and had warmed them, he would begin to talk, or maybe they just remember. Montag felt the slow stir of words, a slow simmer, and then when he knew it was his turn, he would offer something. What would be good for a day like this? It was a book of Ecclesiastes. He said, to everything there is a season. Yes, a time to break down and a time to lift up. Yes, time to keep silence, time to speak. Yes, all that. But what else? What else? He remembers something from the book of Revelation, the last part of the book of Revelation, the end of the book. And on either side of the river was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the trees were for healing of the nations. Yes, thought Montag, that's the one I'll save for noon when they enter the city. That ends the book. Not very satisfying, maybe, I don't know. Oh, thank you, I appreciate that, yeah. Books end, it's a good thing to feel it. Hoping that there is hope for the future. Cycles worn it out. Worthless to study the past. Justify wars. Is it right to do the wrong thing sometimes? Keeping the cycle going. One of your other Socratic seminars next week will have something to do with, are we getting better or worse as a people since thousands of years ago? Is it a better time or a worse time to live than then? Are we figuring it out? Are we learning from those mistakes? Let's go ahead and turn our attention to the essay. Yes, Artie?
What's your next book?
It'll be actually an ancient literature unit from the textbook. So we're going to start in the beginning, literally. Hebrew, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So we'll look at some ancient literature on what happened in the beginning of time. All right, let's go ahead and look at the essay together. If you guys can turn on the light for me, please. Hopefully you enjoyed the book. And whether you did or didn't, you still have to understand the book and show your understanding here. Let's look at the prompt together. We have a few minutes. We should have till 58 or 55. Okay, so last 7 minutes. We'll talk more about this before the MAPS testing tomorrow. But real quick, this is an outline of your essay. I want to see that you fill out a rough draft on paper, regular paper first, and then be able to type it up starting on Thursday. Friday it's due in terms of your final rough draft. So you'll be typing it up and then looking at each other's work. If you haven't done earlier, that's the best. That way on Monday you can turn in a final draft and be done with it. I want you to annotate, highlight, and specify the following prompt, meaning I want you to actually answer it just real quick in 1 or 2 sentences. Let me read it out loud, and then I'll give you some hints as to where you can find the information. You already have it written down in your worksheets and in your Samey Matters. To what extent does literary elements such as character development, strong imagery, and allusions, allegorical stories, right? So story allusions to other books, contribute to the thematic meaning of Fahrenheit? To sort of put that in different language, identify 3 different things that happen in the story, one being character development, one being imagery, and one being allusions or literary things. Take those 3 things and in each one of those do 2 themes. So tell me how it relates to one theme, and then tell me how that same thing relates to another theme. So for instance, character development. You can talk about Montag. How does he start? Where does he finish? What's the Samian matter that relates to his development? That he's developing a new personality. He's questioning things. Connect that to the theme of censorship. How does this thing show the theme of censorship? Well, he's learning to develop things in spite of the fact that there's censorship going on in society. What's another theme? Entertainment. Again, he is constantly bombarded with entertainment, and so he has to break away from it. And here's a quote that shows that theme. If you follow the preset starting sentences, I've started each of your sentences for you, it will begin to make sense. Okay? We will walk through this paper more specifically on Thursday. So make sure you have your worksheets done. Make sure you have your Samian Matters done, because you're going to use those for this essay. Your theme, your character worksheets, all those things are going to help you on this. If you finish those worksheets before Thursday, this paper will already be written. It'll just be taking those ideas and putting them in the right place, which is all that essays are. Taking your tools and putting them in the right place, using them correctly. So reread that on your own. On Thursday, come with an annotated prompt. That is, you underline it, you identify what you're going to be writing about, which characters you want to talk about, and which themes you want to talk about. This paper will write itself, but you need to be aware and with it. Okay? So go ahead and look at it right now before the ending here. We do have about 4 minutes. You can take a look at it on your own. Don't clean up until about 2 minutes out. So you have about 3 minutes right now just to look it over. Look over your prompt. Reread it to yourself. Look down the outline. Just take 2 seconds to do that. Sure. It's just a couple of worksheets. It's not really a big thing.
Wait a minute. Nope.
No, I'm just going to give you the date. You can't read the spark message. Try and get it.
It's a balloon. Hey, guys. And you touched it, so you know, dude.
Yeah, it's not. When I say it's full, they also have.
No way.
Well, people are going to have samey matters, so you start with
Where's that?
you started last week. Okay, so you can do about, let's do about 10 seconds. And book here. You get the book on online, or if you want to take the book home, you just call it check out.
And you touched it. I'd watch it. Come on.
Somebody just decided to put on a condom in class.
Willie on wants his condom. I need my condom.
Go on Smart Notes and get all the answers.
You know what?
Guys, if you use Spark Notes at home, that's super important resource. I highly recommend it. It'll give you a lot of that stuff. It'll model for you how people analyze the characters, important quotes, plot summaries if you need to remember. I also have a comic book on the website, so if you go to the Fahrenheit link on TC English, it has the whole book in a comic book form. It's only like 20 pages. So it's a graphic novel, I should say. Yeah, you're right. Have it all ready to go. Keep track of the reminders, because I might have extra links as resources. Oh, really? I don't want to touch it.
Yeah,
It's a Canadian comic.
I told them don't touch
How are you?
They're all like, oh, look, I found a condom. Oh,
It's a present from me to you.
He's like, shoots out of it.
Oh!
Yeah, it's talking about the book, but it's based